guys, welcome to episode 1, Fear Dog George. So a little backstory on George. George is a yellow lab who is extremely excitable, loves people, but he is very destructive. And as you can see, when we throw the leash on him, he becomes a little bit nervous, a little bit out of his gourd. And ultimately what we learned through this training lesson, this first lesson, was George can't handle treats. Some dogs, they just get too excited for their own good, and the whole point of training is trying to create that neutrality to where the dog listens to you, follows your direction, follows your lead, but doesn't get in an over aroused state, because ultimately that's going to lead to bad decisions. So we've got a slip lead today on George, and generally speaking, when I'm working with fearful dogs, obviously depending on the type of reaction out of fear, I'm generally going to start with a slip lead. It's a fabric and elastic, and it's very forgiving for most every dog behavior. Now, talking about different situations, you have some fearful dogs that will run away, which is, kind of George's MO, but you also have some fearful dogs that will fight. And when you get to the point of dealing with a fighting dog or a dog that's, fearful, and they're going to make that decision to attack you, you may need something a little bit more than a fabric slip lead. But for George today, we put a fabric slip lead. And one of the things that we're probably discussing, right after this second or third repetition is, the point of getting the dog past the fear. Getting the dog past the fear is the goal, because ultimately dogs make terrible decisions when they are fearful. And we just can't have any kind of leeway for that fear, because otherwise it's just going to continue to fester. It can also turn into other bad behavior that we don't want the dog to do. And you can kind of see here just the little bit of affection that I've given to George, just a couple of treats. This is about the time where I start to figure out, maybe this guy can't handle his treats. He can barely handle his affection without losing his mind. You can see his little tail is cleaning the floor as he goes. It's cleaning the place as he gets on there. And this guy is just dying for affection, which is not the end of the world, and we talk, the owner and I talk about this a little bit in the lesson. It's not the end of the world. However, when the owner leaves, George can't be left unattended. He's got that little cover over his couch there because George has destroyed either side of the couch. So we're working through these place repetitions, and place command can be a very helpful tool for dogs that struggle with people coming into the house. They can hop up on that place command, and they can kind of chill out and wait for you to release them. It can kind of change the dynamic, if you will, for the dog whenever people walk into the house, because instead of them taking off and jumping onto the people, they have to wait for you to release them. So it kind of changes things a little bit for them, gives them a different bit of script. Putting them on the place command and asking them to hold that place when somebody comes in is not going to get the dog to stop jumping on them. However, it is going to start to change their mind on what happens when people walk into the house. Guys, I don't know if you noticed, but the last time I pet George, he instantly put his paw on me. And so that's something just to keep in mind, while you're working with your dog. If you want your dog to, stop jumping on you, stop using the paw on you, ultimately think about affection as a currency. And if you're just throwing affection around for no reason, well, then the dog starts to monopolize your affection. And you're just going to create this terrible repetitive system where the dog touches you and you touch the dog. Now, if that's what you want, great. But if that's not what you want, then start to change things a little bit. And so here we're talking about, why we use the slip lead with George, and I'm going into a little bit of the ethics of why, or my ethics as to why I use the slip lead with dogs. First is because, generally speaking, there's two reasons why dogs don't do what we ask them to do. It's either because they don't know or they don't care. And ultimately with George, he's never been trained. So there's no reason to suspect that he knows what he's doing. And, if he doesn't know what he's doing, then he can't possibly care about what he's doing because he doesn't know what he's doing. And so for me, I like to come out a little bit more forgiving. Not only that, but I'm coming into the house and I'm teaching owners how to correct their dog, how to, reward their dog, how to do some of these obedience tasks. And the last thing I want to do is hand them something that, maybe creates more of a light switch compliance out of the dog, but the relationship's just not ready for that right now. And so that's where we're talking about, why I start with this slip lead. And this isn't the same tool I use for every dog. There's dogs where I walk in and we may use a choke chain, which is just a metal version of the slip lead. There's dogs where I walk in and we just use the flat collar. There's dogs that I'll train for 6 weeks on the slip lead and never move past the slip lead because it's just not necessary. So every dog is different in this situation, but that's a little bit why I use that slip lead initially.
Because he's going to get a little bit restless. But as we go through the weeks, we're going to polish it little by little. 25? 3. There you go, bud. Please. Nope. Place. And that's why I don't want him to panically, place, run up to the place.
Very, very crucial aspect that we're talking about right now is fear dogs panically darting to a command or some kind of compliance ask of us. They're just fearfully darting towards whatever the place command, the down, the sit. They're just darting to these things out of fear. That's something that when you're working with a fearful dog, you're going to have to start to notice, because generally speaking, I don't really care if the dog wants to get on the place, because if they're excited about getting on the place, that's great. That's what you want. You want them to go into these commands excitedly. But when you're talking about fearful dogs, the one thing you want to pay attention to is, are they actually understanding this, or are they just shifting from fight or flight panic when you're asking them to do this to now I'm going to fight or fight panic, get to this move, this place command. I'm going to dart over there because I'm so afraid I don't know what to do. Because the goal here is to start to help the dog let go of that fear, let go of that anxiousness, and by them just cowardly darting to place command, to down, without actually easing into it, it could just be them holding onto that fear. Very important note.
Then I'll implement the compliance aspect. And I'm not going to tell him to stay. I'm just going to tell him place, because that means stay. And the reason that I don't want to lean on a word stay is because dogs can't learn the word stay. If you think about...
All right, here we have our first trigger moment of the episode. This will be quite funny for you guys to hear, but the stay command, there's plenty of TV trainers, there's plenty of balance trainers, purely positive trainers that will preach the word stay, and this is my argument against the word stay. Now, you can use whatever word you want. You can say banana for all I care, but let's talk about the word stay for half a second. If I can teach dogs in English, German, if I can teach a 3-legged pit bull to jump through a tire for the word banana, it has nothing to do with the word itself and everything to do with the sound being paired with action. And so when we're talking about the place command, the dog gets the treat or gets the affection for jumping onto the place command. The dog also gets a treat or pet for putting its butt down when you say the word sit. And when you say the word down, the dog doesn't get the treat until it actually puts all its elbows onto the floor. And so each one of those words has an action associated with it. And now for you and I, if I tell you to stay, you're going to go, oh, he wants me to wait here. Or if I tell you to wait, you're going to go, oh, he wants me to stay here, because you understand the definition. And so, a lot of people struggle with that, especially trainers, because, the pride gets in the way or whatever. But ultimately, all I'm trying to suggest is maybe we use less words and give the words that we do use meaning. Let's talk about, feeding a dog breakfast or dinner for half a second, because this is the normal scenario for people. So you tell the dog sit, and then you say stay because you watch too much Caesar, and you're filling the bowl. The dog's pretty excited. He's wiping his tail on the floor. He's so excited. He's windshield wiping, and you put the bowl on the floor. And as soon as you put the bowl on the floor, the dog gets up, and you say no, sit, stay, and the dog puts his butt back down, and you said your stay, so this dog's gonna stay, and ultimately you bring the bowl back down to the floor, and as soon as you touch the floor, the dog gets up again, and you say no, sit, stay. And in our minds, we think that the stay is creating this next repetition's compliance, because we go to put the bowl down and the dog keeps his butt on the ground, and we're like, hey, that stay worked. And here I would argue to you that the consequence of losing the food bowl from his line of sight is actually the thing that is causing the dog to stay in the sit. Just the same way as if you tell a dog gentle or no bite, which all of these words really can't mean anything. The dog is stopping the behavior more out of confusion. And now, obviously, this is my assumption because you can't read dog minds. But if you think about it just a little bit and remove your ego from it, it might start to make sense. So every time I work with a dog, my stay command is implied. Place means place until I tell you otherwise. Sit means sit till I tell you otherwise. And down means down until I tell you otherwise.
How far away from George can I be and he complies with the command? Duration is at how far for how long?
Distance, duration, distraction. The 3 Ds for compliance checkers on any obedience task. These are things that are set out by the AKC. This is something that I use every day with my clients. Distance is how far away from the dog can I be, and they comply with the command. Duration is at how far for how long can the dog comply with its command. And then distractions can literally be anything. It could be the time of day. It could be the number of people in the house. It could be the room of the house. It could be inside the house, outside the house. Are there dogs present? Are there food present? Like all of those different variables. But it's very important to, recognize those variables rather than just going, oh, my dog knows how to do the sit. And then as soon as somebody walks in the house, you're like, oh, crap, I guess they don't know the sit. Well, you just added a new variable. Teach them that sit as that person walks into the house.
And I go, well, do you train around 15 people? Well, no, we've only got the 3 people in the house. Well, adding 12 more people is definitely going to add to this distraction. Could he do the place? Yes. Is he going to be good at it? No. His compliance is going to be much lower. So our expectations should kind of shift in that situation. Not that we should throw training away, but we should have maybe a better perspective when we go into it.
Channel your expectations. If there's one thing that I can suggest to people, especially in this delayed gratification generation, is channel your expectations. There were a lot of big name trainers that were doing online training. Heck, they still are doing online training. And there's plenty of people that have signed up for me after doing online training because they didn't ever train their dog outside of the office behind the Zoom camera. So, having perspective and having clear expectations is going to be the best thing you can do for your dog. Because if you haven't taught them, you shouldn't expect them, right? And the other thing that we're talking about here is pressure being a scale. This is something that, for me, coming into the homes and working with a lot of different behaviors and a lot of different temperaments, something that I've kind of picked up is pressure is a scale. And what that means is that the tool that we're using to correct the dog should be something that you should linearly travel upward if necessary, meaning you shouldn't start with the highest thing in the beginning, but you should start with something lower and work your way up as the dog starts to become more confident. As they become more confident, they're going to test the boundaries a little bit more, but pressure should always be a scale. It shouldn't be something that you're stuck with and you never advance from because you're unsure of how to use the next thing. Awesome.
Okay. Everybody. Good job. Now, whether he knows exactly what I want him to do right now or not, I'm not going to focus on that. All I'm going to focus on is going through the motions and giving him the repetitions. Because one of the areas where people make place, good job, and he's seemingly calm. Other than his panting, he's calm.
This goes along with channeling your expectations. One of the areas that I think people struggle with the most is thinking their dog knows more than it knows or cares more than it cares in any kind of situation. And those are things that you can't really determine by other than one thing. If we think our dog knows, the only way that we can kind of take that train of thought is through repping our dog out, doing a ton of repetitions with the dog in a ton of different environments. That's the only way that we can be a little bit more confident in the fact that the dog might know what we want it to do. And then when we're talking about the dog caring about doing what we're asking, the only way that we can verify that the dog cares is through repetitions. That's it. That's the only way we can verify. We can't ask George over here, hey buddy, do you care about doing the place command? He's not going to tell us anything. And if he barks at us, we're not going to understand it. So ultimately, you want to make sure that you're not expecting your dog to do something that they're not capable of doing. Set your dog up for success by teaching them what the right thing is. Hold that accountability for a long enough period of time to where the dog shows you time and time again that they know what they're supposed to do. Because at the end of the day, they're still animals, and their animals are unpredictable, and we can't read their minds. So it just makes it even more challenging.
What I want him to do is in his best interest. And so for me, what I want to focus on is teaching him what I want him to do, rather than like, how much does George actually know? I have no idea. I don't want to assume he's a genius and then stand here and go, hey George, do the right thing, and I drop the leash and he goes, you're an idiot. I don't want that to happen. I want to be very clear that I'm the teacher, not an inspector, and I'm going to teach you what I want you to do. Okay?
All right, to summarize George's first lesson, we've got an excitable lab who just doesn't know what is expected out of him. He's a little destructive, and he's a little too excited for his own good. And ultimately, we worked on place command this lesson. I was teaching the owner how to correct George in a timely manner, when to reward him, how much is too much, what is not enough. Just going through the timing, the cadence of everything. But this is going to wrap up episode 1, guys. Leave some comments below on what you guys want to see next. I have another video of another fearful dog, totally opposite end of the spectrum. This dog is slow moving. He mimics a snail. And his name was Bob. And so, guys, leave a comment on what you guys want me to talk about during the lessons. If you guys don't like my overlay and you want me just to play the video, well, hopefully the video's got good audio because I'm not wearing a lapel. But this was episode 1, Fearful Dog George. Let me know what you guys think. Thanks.